second talk edition and by Nicola Davis, and his talk is kind of for the semantics of the Javanese speech level.
Thanks. Notice the D here, so we're changing languages. Just a bit of, I don't like the fact that this is here, but yeah, so this is what I'm going to present today is building on some work I did a couple of years ago, or I presented a couple of years ago now, that was not semantic in nature. The thing being addressed is semantic or phonetic, but the model was somehow just dealing with combinatoric restrictions in the system that I'll tell you about in Javanese. Just a little bit of background and full disclosures about the history of the slides involved. What I'm going to be talking about is Javanese and some issues that have come up as I've tried to model what happens in the so-called speech level system and the honorific system using some formal semantic tool. So why does this not work? Okay, so Javanese, Austronesian language, famously spoken on the island of Java predominantly, has a rather articulated so-called speech level system. It's a Western Indonesian language thing. You're going to learn 3 words of Javanese today, and I'd like you to put them in your head for the next 30 minutes. Those words are ngoko, kromo, and madyo. And they're like metalinguistic terms that Javanese speakers use to describe the Javanese speech level system. Any given utterance or sentence of Javanese can normally be unambiguously sorted into one of these 3 categories. The choice between sentences in these 3 categories seems to be conditioned primarily by status, age, and intimacy. With the following canonical context of usage. So a local sentence will be canonically used towards a low status addressee who is not older than the speaker and with whom the speaker is in an intimate relationship. So this is like the low speech level. And that word in Javanese means something like low, by the way, or common. Kromo, which means high, means, or is canonically used in the opposite sort of situation. So you're talking to an aristocrat who's much older than you and with whom you don't have an intimate relationship. And then this so-called madyo, or the mid-level system, is what's been described by Wolf and Pujo Suparno as a halfway house between the 2, the low and the high, ngoko and kromo. And it's canonically used in situations where those factors that determine speech level are in some way in conflict. So for example, let's say you have someone who's of high status but younger than you. And so you're getting conflicting demands on the speech levels, and this is one way of resolving that. Okay, that's the idea. So how does this work formally? And as I said, you can normally, most sentences in Javanese, and certainly any extended sequence of sentences, you can end up unambiguously assigning to one of these 3 categories. And the way it works is that a surprisingly large number of basic vocabulary items in Javanese come with 2 or more alternate forms. It's suppletion. And these suppletive forms will have restrictions as to which of the speech levels they're compatible with. So this example from Klein's, or maybe I should say these 3 examples from Klein's illustrate. So the sentence, or the 3 sentences are going to have the same truth conditional content. Bu Siti or Madam Siti has already eaten that one. And there's 3 versions that are each associated with one of the 3 speech levels. So let me color code that and show you. So the kromo sentence up top, Bu Siti sampun nedal ingkan menikah, which means Bu Siti has already eaten that one. All of the things in blue there are compatible with the kromo speech level and incompatible with the ngoko speech level. The ngoko version, you replace all of those with suppletive alternates that have the same meaning, but tell you that you are no longer in the kromo speech level. They're incompatible with kromo, but they are compatible with ngoko. So, busiti wes mangan sing hui. Okay. You can see that this applies across all kinds of lexical categories, by the way. Relativizers, demonstrative, or dactic, pronoun type elements, verbs, adverbs, and so on. Good luck learning Javanese. The madyo level is interesting. It's characterized in the first place by a mixture of the 2 forms. So you, in the example at hand, you take the chromal form for eat and the local form for the relativizer. That's one thing to do. And there's also a few dozen maybe forms that are only compatible with the module level. So they unambiguously tell you that you're in that mid-level. They're either compatible with the chroma or the local level, but only with the module. So in the case at hand, you have Mpun and Miku that have that characteristic. There's also forms that are only compatible with local, that is to say, not with chroma or with module. In the example here, the Wis and the Mangan are such forms. And similarly, there's forms that are compatible only with chroma, not with module and not with module. Incidentally, this is a special set of sentences. These are the only combinations that are possible here. So, you know, multiply out all of the other combinations and they're all categorically bad, apparently. You go into field work with a person who has mastery of the system, and not all Javanese speakers do. Not all dialects of Javanese use the system. Okay. So far so good. That's the picture. Now, how to model it? Well, before we do that, what you gather from this is that empirically, there's sort of three types of words you end up that are sensitive to the speech level system. So you have words like here, sampun, which are chroma only. You have words like nidal, which are chroma or module. Traditionally, these are both called chroma alternates, but they have a different distribution. You have the module only words, you have the local only words, and you have the words that are local or module. So you have 5 classes of words that are sensitive to the speech level system, or that are restricted in terms of which speech levels they can use with. Okay. So the previous analysis I mentioned, you can code this up with a set of features. It's kind of maybe obvious what's happening here, so maybe I don't have to spend verbiage on it. But the basic idea is that you're going to include some negative features for the chroma and local only words, so a -n and a -k respectively. And the module is like, hey, it's both. I'm both plus n and plus k. You incidentally do this the other way around and it all works out the same. But, okay. So far so good, I hope. Now, what you end up with, then the idea is that this will be the features for those 5 classes of words that you get. And you combine those features, and this is how you signal, or this is the characteristic way of signaling the 3 speech levels. So chroma is -n plus k, so you should use words that altogether give you those feature values. Module is +n plus k, moko is +n minus k, okay? And you have this syntagmatic constraint in the grammar of Javanese that if you have a single sentence where you've used +n by analysis, a word that would be +n and another word that would be -n, the thing is clients talks about this stuff, but consultants reject it the way you reject an ungrammatical sentence or something something's wrong with this sentence, apparently. I mean, what does that mean? It's unacceptable. People react badly to it. Same thing with the +k and -k items. Okay, not to feed a proverbial animal that's, yeah, but this is it in a picture. Okay. Okay. What the chart there is showing you is the compatibility of the 5 classes of words in the 3 speech levels, okay, and how that corresponds to the features. Now we can turn to the semantic issues. So these features can just be thought of as grammatical features. You can think of the syntagmatic constraints as just being part of the grammar. But of course, there's this meaning component, and I'd like to think that maybe it could fall out from some kind of semantic facts or pragmatic facts. Klein's attempts to do this, and I'm not going to go into it. He tries to assign something that corresponds to these features I proposed directly in terms of some pragmatic characterizations, and I'm seeing some of you smile as you read. It was an honest attempt, but without going into it, here's a chart from Wolf and Josudarm, which is basically describing which forms are observed to occur in which combinations of those 3 factors I mentioned. So you have like aristocrat and non-aristocrat speaker and addressee, older and not older addressee, intimate and non-intimate relationship, in which of the speech levels are found to occur there. And without getting any farther into it, this does not map well onto this. Okay. So what else can we do? So a number of researchers, some of whom are one of whom is in this room, there's a bit of an industry now trying to model honorific, thanks, Alex. Trying to model honorific systems using a simple idea that you have some kind of continuous interval that corresponds to something like formality, register, emotive attitude towards holding between two individuals. And so using this type of approach, we could say, well, let's say that speech level corresponds formally to subintervals of this real interval from 0 to 1. We can set moko to 0 in the subinterval from 0 to 0.1, chromo from 0.9 to 1, and modulo in between. Then you would locate yourself on this interval via some function, I'll call it SL for speech level, that takes ordered pairs and returns points on this interval. And SL itself will be a function from, in some nebulous way, it takes into account those properties that I was mentioning, level of intimacy, relative status, and relative age, or whatever turns out to be the right bag of things that Javanese speech level choice is sensitive to. This is very much in line with what is done in Alan's book on honorification, but with different factors underlying the choice. Okay? But formally, it's the same thing, essentially. Now, this is how you can implement it. Basically, take your features plus n and plus k and have them require that you are, plus n is going to require that you're below the chromal threshold, right? I'm not up in the chromal area. Plus k will require that you are above the local interval. And then minus n and minus k will say, I'm not in here. And sorry, minus k will say, I'm over here. And minus n will say, I'm in here. That's the idea. Let me show you this with a picture. Well, before we do that, 0.1 and 0.9 were arbitrary, so let's replace it with n and k. We have an inequality that says 0 is less than n is less than k is less than 1. That's the real story, and that's the picture of where the features put you in that space. Okay. Good. Notice that you can have plus n and plus k, and that'll together determine that you're in here. The minus features get you over there. So once you have a minus feature, the plus feature is redundant, actually. Okay, fine. Now, some consequences are that first, negative feature values are just modeled as negation. Yeah. Second, that the syntagmatic constraints that I mentioned that you might have thought, or that some people treat as essentially grammatical facts, are instead derived semantically. So plus k and minus k make contradictory requirements, and so do plus n and minus n. The fact that there isn't another class of lexical items that would be minus n and minus k is also explained. In principle, there's no reason just on the feature-based system why such a class shouldn't exist, but it falls out, semantically. Okay, fine. This is not the most interesting part. This is the idea. So this will model the system. It's not that exciting. Maybe it works. But then it turns out Javanese has an additional fact, which is that some words have, in addition to alternates that give you information about what speech level you're in, will also have basically an argument honorific. So something that, a form that instead targets some grammatically determined referent for honorification, for lack of a better word, or deference. So we had two words for eat that you saw earlier, mangan, the ngoko only one, and nada, the madyo promo one. There's another word for eat, dahar, which signals respect or deference or honor toward the eater. So either the grammatical subject or the agent of the, depending on how you model it. So if you replace the word for eat with dahar, first you'll notice that all three speech levels are compatible with dahar. And the other words are sufficient to tell you what speech level you're in anyway, so nothing changes there. But dahar will make, I don't know why I switched Busijia for Bumarta, that might have just been a diachronic fact of these slides. But what you do is in any of these cases, you're signaling deference to Bu Marta. So you say, Bu Marta already ate that one, and I'm signaling respect to Bu Marta by using dahar. How many minutes is that left? Perfect. 5? Yeah, thanks. So first of all, the fact that dahar is compatible with all 3 speech levels means it's the use of dahar is orthogonal to the speech level system in terms of the basic combinatorics. Like I was mentioning, words that care about speech level can clash with each other. But once you have these deferential terms, which is like meshiagaru, right? It's freely usable no matter what speech level you're in, because speech level is basically about either the situation as a whole or, according to this analysis, the relationship between the speaker and the addressee. The honorific or the deferential is about the relationship between the speaker and some in this case, the subject of the sentence. Okay. Orthogonal, right? But so, okay, fine. So what's the semantics of deferentials? And the obvious thing to do would be to say what I just said, that speech level contrast signals something about the relationship between the speaker and the addressee. These deferentials signal something about the relationship between the speaker and the grammatically or lexically determined referent of some, like the subject, for example. So the simple theory would be to say you just use the same stuff, that interval and the pairs of individuals and that speech level function and so on. But you determine for the speech level guys, you have the relationship between the speaker and the hearer, and then the inequality depends on the details. And then for deferentials, you're just going to leave that argument open and you somehow determine it elsewhere. Okay. And so you can imagine some toy examples, toy denotations for our 3 verbs meaning to eat. Bida and mangan so they're all going to mean, x8 or y8x, I should say. But the part in hot pink is the expressive or the conventional implicature or the presupposition contributed. And basically, the main technical issue becomes how to make sure that in the case of the deferential, you get your arguments to be resolved correctly. That's a non-trivial technical problem that some of us have thought about. And then empirically, maybe empirically isn't the right question. Yeah, empirically, what happens if you passivize that verb? What happens if you have a non-referential argument? None of that stuff I've seen addressed in the literature, and it's hard to do field work on the honorific, on the speech level system in Javanese for reasons I can tell you about if you're curious. But for this talk, the question is, how does the deferential degree D relate to the speech level anchors N and K? So by hypothesis, the speech level guys were using N and K and saying, okay, if you're above K, that's a chromal speech level. If you're below N, that's local. And if you're between N and K, that's the modulo. And where you are is a function, where you should be is a function of the relationship between the speaker and the hearer. We have guys that are indicating the relationship between the speaker and someone else. You're going to use this degree D. Where does D sit on that interval? Okay. And this brings us to the final problem and the big problem that I'd like thoughts about. There's orthogonality here, I said. It doesn't matter what the speech level is when you use a deferential. But then this leads to the question at the bottom of the slide. What happens when the grammatically determined referent just is the addressee? So to look at this example, in Javanese, you can use names to talk to, the addressee can be Bu Marta in this sentence. So if you're using this sentence to ask or to, I'm not sure why you would do this, but to say to Bu Marta, you already ate this.
Dementia.
What's dementia? Thank you. Yeah, that's actually part of the fieldwork problem of this particular. Yeah. So anyway, if you were addressing Bu Marta here, you would see that dahar would be targeting Bu Marta. So the orthogonality would collapse. So you're simultaneously using the speech level system to indicate the relationship with Marta, and you're using the deferential to target Marta. So what happens there? And if you read going into the literature, I think I'm out. Can I have 1 more minute to talk, and then we'll have 9 minutes of questions? I want to illustrate the problem. Okay, this is what Uhlenbeck says happens empirically. Supposedly, back in the 1960s, the idea is that I said you have local level and chromal level. Uhlenbeck says within the local and chromal levels, you can make an additional distinction based on how you answer the question. When I have an addressee referring, like when I want to say that the subject of eat is the addressee, do I use the deferential or not? And basically he says, if you use it, it bumps the level up. So if I'm using local with someone, but then I use deferentials towards them, I'm still local level, but I bumped it up. If I'm in chromal and I use deferentials that target the addressee, I bump up my chromal level. And if you think about it, given that machinery I've described to you, this cannot be. This kind of fact cannot be. So let me run it through. Imagine, let's look at the second bullet. For this to work at the chromal speech level, Dahar should require that the level between S and X is greater than K prime, with X resolved to the addressee, such that K prime is greater than K, because that's what needs to bump the level up. Okay? So therefore, K prime should be all the way over here on the right, and certainly greater than N. But if it's greater than N, it should be incompatible with local. But it's not, according to Uhlenbeck. What's going on? Well, I'll stop here and leave the slide up here, but yeah, let's end there. And if someone wants to know, if the question is, show me the last 2 slides, I'll do that. But otherwise, it's a question.
Thank speaker.
Yes, Ellen.
I have some questions, but first I want to see the last 2 slides.
Okay, well, speak of the devil. So what goes wrong here? And it's basically that we've used the same, we've mapped it to the same place, and we've gotten some kind of contradiction. So what might be going on, what one thought would be, well, what if those underlying dimensions that we've collapsed into this single interval are being selectively resurrected in this case? Like maybe what you're doing here is going, oh, for the purposes of intimacy, I'm going to be on that local level, but I'm going to use the deferentials to say that there's some aspect of our relationship that I should preserve honorification for. So that you're using that mismatch to signal a mismatch, which is also what Manjo does, right? So the idea would be like, is it possible that we shouldn't be collapsing those things into this interval? And there's a quote from a very nice book about honorifics written by you, which suggests that, hey, I'm going to let the formalism let you go back and grab these things, even though it doesn't seem empirically necessary given what has been seen so far. So maybe that's one idea. The other idea is that the whole thing is wrong-headed, as one helpful reviewer suggested to me for a different venue. Let's not do any of this at all. Maybe a more expressive, a more dynamic theory is necessary. Maybe you like, oh, I need some mechanism where I can bump myself up and bump myself down. Yeah, that's the last slide.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question.
Hi.
Okay, so let's see. My first question is, how much? Huh?
The mic is above.
My first question is, how much of the relevant data, or this? I mean, is there something comparable to this that one can extract from similar facts in Japanese? Of course, okay. So of course, there's no speech levels, right? And in the same sense, but
yeah,
you know, the relationship between things like meishiagaru and
yes.
You know.
So this is excellent. Yes.
Okay. That's my first question. And then I have another comment / question about a possibility for using the formalism.
Yeah.
The other formalism bit on the slide, but but maybe we can talk about it later.
Yeah. So okay, this idea that so this what's called speech levels versus deferential. This maps onto what are called sometimes utterance honorifics versus argument honorifics, or addressee-oriented honorifics versus, for example, subject and object honorifics. So in the case of Japanese, this maps on approximately to des, like te nego, so like, do you use des and mas or not? That's addressee-oriented, that's speech level. It's just a two-way distinction in Japanese, it's less complicated. And the deferentials would be meshiagaru and so on. And in Japanese, these are also orthogonal. You can mix and match as you want, right? So you have a binary switch basically for each one, and you get the 4 combinations. It's a little more complicated than that. And the same problem comes up when you go, okay, what do I do when I have an addressee? I have to decide to use des and mas or not. And I'm going to say, have you eaten yet? Do I say meshiagaru or do I say taberu? And empirically, what seems to happen is most speakers of Japanese do not want to use meshiagaru without desmas if it's an addressee is the subject. So, mo meshiagatta no is a little bit weird for a lot of people. Meshiagarimashita. And incidentally, I have to say in your book, you would take the average and it seems to be the wrong thing, but we can talk about it. That's empirically a lot of people's judgment. However, there's a recent paper by Satoshi Tomioka, and I cannot remember his co-author. I apologize to them. But that was sent to me. Anyway, there's this kind of madam speech associated with certain kind of upper class women in Tokyo who do this. その時、そちらが、あなたが召し上がったものがこちらにあるよ, or something like this apparently exists. And they analyze it as, oh, there's a certain persona associated with this. So as soon as you start doing this, you're no longer really talking about the relationship between the speaker and the addressee. The speaker is somehow demonstrating something about themselves, maybe. And it very much triggers a certain kind of yakuwari, like, oh, this person is talking like a certain kind of woman of a certain social class and so on. So that is the observation that exists for this in Japanese. Most Japanese speakers say, no. If I'm talking to a second person, if I have a second person subject and I've used meshiagaru, I must use desmas, otherwise it's weird. That's one kind of speaker of Japanese. And the other kind is, I'm the kind of person who does this, and that says something about my persona. So that's, maybe this could be taken and applied to Javanese. I will add a fact about Javanese speech level system. The system I'm describing is associated with aristocratic speech. So basically the comments are that this is how aristocrats in Yogyakarta speak Javanese, and the commoners don't have full mastery of the system. They'll do the best they can when they speak to someone that they feel they need to use it with, but they'll be wrong. They won't use it right. Just like Japanese speakers don't all have full command of. So I actually have a suspicion that part of what's going on is I'm going to talk to you with a low speech level, but I'm going to demonstrate to you that I'm the kind of person who can use the honorific system correctly. I'm the kind of person who knows how to use meshiagaru and oran nigaru and all that. So I kind of suspect that might be the resolution to this. Sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but hi. So you might get that persona-based social meaning creeping in these mismatch cases.
I have many more things to say.
I bet you do.
Also many more things to say in response to what you just said.
Hi.
But maybe I should let someone else say a thing too. And
Short question. I have a very short question. So I'm wondering, like, what would be the dictionary form for these items, and also like how people talk to themselves, like in writing a diary, or just to describe the view in like setting up for a novel.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question. The traditional view is to treat the moko, if you have alternates, to treat the moko form as somehow basic. Okay, and some people have claimed that the only reason moko is when you have competition with another form, and it seems that it's restricted, but it's only through competition. That's one view that exists out there. So that's the simple answer is moko is treated as the basic dictionary form. So you look up these things in the dictionary, and it tells you, let's say an Indonesian to Javanese dictionary, or a English to Javanese dictionary. So you look up the word eat, what are you going to get? And you're going to get, in this case, manga. You'll get the moko form, and then it'll give you a note that says, here's the chromo form. And also the word in Javanese for the differential, they high chromo. They'll give you that as well, and they'll label it. That's the answer, the simple answer. What do you do when you're talking to yourself? There's some discussion about this, and I don't know what, empirically, I don't know what the truth is. People will claim that people use local to talk to themselves, though. Yeah.
Additional question. So if like the dictionary form is actually like the local form, what some more people use actually like TV news, radio program, because like on one hand it should be like it should be delivered just like dictionary with a basic title, but on the other hand, your audience should
Yeah.
be respected.
So the answer is news and things are not given in Japanese anymore. Like Indonesian is the national. I'm serious. Like it's this issue where you don't get to see the answer to your question because the news is done in Indonesian, not in Japanese. But it's kind of like Japanese, I think. It's weird in a Wikipedia entry to use honorifics. You kind of default to the low form, but empirically, I don't know the answer to the question. This is one of the reasons they've decided not to make Japanese the national language of Indonesia. Despite it being the most commonly spoken first language in Indonesia, they were like, this speech level system is going to cause problems, and we're going to use Malay instead. So yeah. Oh. Hi, but I know we're out of time, so I should stop. Okay. Thank you.
So we can keep the discussion later. Okay, thanks the speaker. Thank you.